Welcome back to the Pistons Jack YouTube channel. On today's episode, we are going to react to some chatter and rumors circulating around Jaden Ivey potentially being traded. So let's get to it. Okay, so earlier today, Brett Siegel from Clutch Points dropped kind of like a summary article from everything he heard at Summer League, and he kind of covered all the teams, but obviously we want to focus on the Pistons nugget of info here. And as you can see on the right, I'll just read it out in full and we're going to break it down. So Brett said, one interesting name came up in some early trade chatter entering the 25-26 season at NBA Summer League in Las Vegas, Jaden Ivey. Coming off his broken left fibula, Ivey is entering the final year of his rookie contract, and rival teams would question how well he fits into the image Detroit has built for itself. Whereas Cade Cunningham takes his time and attacks opponents at his own pace, Ivey is an up-tempo guard who utilizes speed and athleticism in his game. The Pistons, as a whole, aren't a team that pushes the pace, and they tend to move the ball around on offense instead of attacking in isolation sets like Ivey likes to do. Keep an eye on the Pistons seeking a big upgrade before the trade deadline and potentially including Ivey in said move. Okay, so let's break down that first paragraph. The first thing that stands out to me here is that it seems like where this is coming from, this discussion and chat is coming from, is rival teams simply just looking at the fit. Rival teams is highlighted here. This isn't something coming from Pistons officials or from a Pistons source as such, but it's more about rival teams questioning the fit of Cade. And while I disagree with what's been cited here about the fit not working in terms of Cade's slower pacing and the way he attacks methodically compared to Ivey being up-tempo, who does the speed, I actually think that's what's so appealing about the pairing, if they can hit their ceiling, is that there is a real change of pace and that Cade's more methodical, break you down, whereas Ivey's more brute, like force and strength on drives and can ideally shoot threes and thrive off the ball. So I kind of disagree with that, but it feels like this chat is just coming from rival teams. Of course, teams are going to be looking at this backcourt that honestly has never got a real shot to play together. Obviously, we've gone over it numerous times, but for those that are new, Jaden Ivey, pretty much Cade was gone for Ivey's entire rookie season. I think they played 10 games together. Then in Ivey's second season, it's the Monty Williams experience. And obviously, that was not ideal for Jaden. They did play together, and to be honest, there was a little bit left to be desired. But in such a dysfunctional season where the team was horrific, it's hard to have any main takeaways. And then this past season, obviously, we get 30 games or close to it, and then Ivey breaks his leg. So obviously, teams are looking at that and going, does this backcourt work? I mean, the Pistons are still trying to figure it out. And I'm going to mention in a minute what we should really be monitoring as Pistons fans to see if Ivey is going to be traded in just a moment. But I just want to finish off reading through this little piece here. The second part of this, as it relates talking about the Pistons being a team who don't push the pace and prefer to move the ball around on offense and don't really prioritize isolation, is something Ivey likes to do. J.I. is not really an isolation player, so I wouldn't read too much into that second part. It looks like a bit of an oversight from Brett. Maybe not has watched the Pistons a whole lot, which is fair enough. I've actually really enjoyed Brett's reporting, so I'm not going to get him too much. I just think it's worth saying that the Pistons were one of the teams that had the best. I think they were a top 10 team in terms of pace on the season. Of course, Cade controls the pace, and they do run a lot of pick and roll, but Ivey also runs a lot of pick and roll. Ivey's best types of plays last season were off cuts, were off the catch shooting. Those are his most efficient shots. If you look at synergy, his least efficient were isolations, and he only ran like 40 isolations last season, which was one of his lesser play types. So maybe at Ivey's peak, that's the player he wants to be, and maybe that's what Brett's trying to say, but it hasn't really who he has been so far. So that's kind of that. Honestly, the way Trajan Langdon has spoken this entire offseason, it sounds like there's no intention to move Jaden Ivey, at least before the start of the season. It sounds like there's been a big priority on like letting Dennis Schroeder go. A lot of letting him go was obviously Ivey coming back and sliding essentially straight into that role and taking a huge chunk of those minutes. Trajan said as much himself. Karis LeVert's going to help fill some of that playmaking void as well with Dennis gone. But yeah, Jaden Ivey seems to be a huge part of how the Pistons are going to open the next season. So to be honest, Pistons fans are like, for those that don't keep up with day-to-day news and aren't in the thick of Twitter and Reddit and in the, if you're not keeping up with it, don't be too alarmed by this. I think it's very natural for teams to be wondering what's going on with Jaden Ivey. I mean, teams are probably thinking that about a lot of the Pistons' young players. But Jaden Ivey obviously coming off a broken leg. Obviously, him and Cade, he's going into year 4, so it's like I can see why teams are looking at him in particular and thinking, what's the go with the Pistons here? They still don't seem to know what the Cade and Ivey backcourt looks like. I'm really hopeful we can get a solid 50 games up until the trade deadline, or 45, whatever it is, to finally see what these two can be. Because whilst I think you can say they haven't worked the best together, I also think it just has really had close to like the worst possible context surrounding it in terms of injury and just a horrible year and the sandwich in the middle between those injuries. So that's my thoughts on that. I don't think Ivey's getting traded anytime soon. But what I think we should all be looking for as a potential sign that an Ivey trade is more nearer than not is what happens with these contract extensions. And the reason for that is Trajan was asked about both this kind of goes for Jalen Duren and Jaden Ivey, but we'll just focus on Ivey for now. But when Trajan was asked about this pre-draft in end of June, he said that it's something that he's going to look at later in the summer, is figuring out those extensions for Ivey and Duren. Now, I've heard people talk about Ivey potentially wanting around $30 million annually. So I'm not going to spend too much time discussing that. I'm hoping to do an episode later this week with that guy, Kyle Metz, salary cap guru, to discuss that. But look, whether or not a deal gets done between Ivey and the Pistons, I'm not sure. I feel like the Pistons are going to want to re-sign both of them, Duren and Ivey. It's just going to be a matter of whether Ivey thinks he's worth more, or he wants to take the long-term security and not bet on himself next year. But if no extension is reached, and we're just going to focus on Ivey for this video, that is then where you can start to potentially think a trade is more near. And it doesn't mean a trade's happening. It just means that if they do sign Ivey to a contract extension, it would be horrible business to even think about trading him during the upcoming season. And that's because of the poison pill ruling in the CBA. So essentially what the poison pill is so let's say Jaden Ivey signs this summer for 4 years, $100 million, but that won't kick in until the 26-27 season, after this season. If the Pistons do that extension, but then get into the season and want to trade him, they have to, the team taking on Ivey the Pistons would trade Ivey out for I think he's on $8 million, but the team taking him on has to hit the average salaries of entire contract, so the $8 million plus $108 million across 5 years, that is what they have to take onto their books. So for that team to take that onto their books just doesn't really make much sense, which reduces JI's value. So the poison pill kind of makes it almost impossible to trade that player. Obviously, you could trade them the following season and the poison pill is removed once they're on that new deal, but that's a provision that was put in, I think, last CBA to avoid or maybe it's been around for ages, but it's to stop teams trading their player who's just recommitted to them before their deal is even kicked in. So if Ivey signs, I would say he's staying for at least the next 24 to 36 months, and there's a real investment. The Pistons probably getting him on a good deal. If he doesn't sign, it might just mean Ivey wants to get his value up even higher and he was going to bet on himself, or it could mean as well that the Pistons, he'll be a lot more tradable. So because he'll only be on the 1 year, $8 million. And I think a team who would trade for him would get his bird rights and restricted rights to extend him. So that's my thoughts on it all. I don't think he's getting traded before opening night. I would be shocked, but you never know. We've seen stranger things happen, but I think there's a real investment in Ivey and Cade to see what those two have before the trade deadline. And I'm still very high on JI, and I can't wait to see him back. But hope that helps update you all. Hope you learned something. Appreciate all the love on the channel recently. We're going to keep going here pretty much close to every day for as long as we can. So stick with me. And as always, go Pistons.